Okay, all right, we're live. So a little bit on news. Want to kind of just remind ourselves current relevant news in relation to culture and whatnot, okay? So I think all this one is just all about Indigenous people, right? How many people know about the topic of Indigenous? Did you raise your hand? No, okay, sorry, I thought I saw. How many people know about the topic of missing Indigenous women? 1, 2, 3. So a few of you, okay? What we're talking about is a really terrible case in Canada, also similar cases in the United States where Indigenous women have gone missing, right? And they wind up dead, usually abused, right? And often targeted, and many police and state agencies aren't really looking into it. Okay, so strangely enough, we have to have a bill for this. I mean, it's like nuts. So we have to have legislation for like finding the missing women, because I thought that was part of the law, but this is special focus on this because it's not being addressed, right? North Dakota, looks like we've got some more there. I think Wisconsin, maybe another one that's introducing legislation as well. We'll take a look at that throughout the semester and see what happens with that, right? I hope it gets passed because it's not getting attention, right? How many people have heard of the Am I Next campaign? Okay, so that's associated with this, Am I Next? And so, let's see, just images, I guess. So, this is the most, I mean, obviously we've got a bunch of different images here, but the Am I Next campaign was associated with missing Indigenous women, okay? So, and it was a concern because what we found was many of the women that were speaking up from those Indigenous communities were then going missing. So the activists were even going missing, those that were protesting what was happening to the missing women. So it was really a horrible thing. So that was something that surfaced after that. Okay. Now, there's also a piece that was in the news, Life Hacker. It's kind of, I'm not really sure about this news source. I don't see any other reference to AP News or anything like that here. So kind of wishy-washy in terms of a news source, but it's kind of interesting nonetheless. All right. It says, what is the Indigenous Peoples Movement? Right. So we're talking about something in this article that says it's new. Okay, so we know that just recently we had a march, right, of Indigenous people in Washington, D.C., and that's part of this. Okay, so the new movement is something that, like what they say here, they're seeking legal, political, and cultural recognition where they feel they're underrepresented, right? Okay, so how many people saw news related to this march? Okay, how many saw news related to this march in your classroom? Nobody. Okay, like it's been a topic that we haven't been dealing with very much. Has anybody talked about it in your classrooms with you? No. Oh, it's like a freaky, scary topic for us professors, so maybe that's why. I don't know. I find it really surprising, though. How many people are surprised we haven't talked about it yet? Okay, so how many people saw two sides of the news? Okay, so there were a couple of different scenes that we saw, right? What we saw was a whole bunch of things that happened afterwards as well, right? We saw in the beginning, we saw a news clip, and all we saw was a quick clip between an Indigenous man banging a drum and a Catholic schoolboy that looked like he had a funny smirk on his face. All right, I didn't like the smirk, right? I didn't like the fact that they were so close together. It was nerve-wracking to see the news, right? And we saw two sides of the news. One side said, the boy was wearing a MAGA hat and was being political and went up to the gentleman and threatened the gentleman, right? And then we got another news report that said, well, if you step back and watch all of the interaction, right? How many saw that one? Okay, and if you watch all of the interaction, then maybe there was an aggressive kind of coming together where maybe both of them are wrong, or one was even faulting the indigenous people as well, right? Saw that. How many people saw CNN? Right? We got an interview on CNN with the gentleman that did the drumming, said he felt threatened, right? This is all really concerning, right? Who was right? Does anybody know who was right? 100%? Did anybody get a real good clear from either clip on exactly what happened? I didn't either. I'm disturbed. Yes, what did you say?
You can watch the 45-minute video.
Oh, there's a 45-minute video. I didn't get to that. Can you send me that link, please? Because I've missed all of these things, okay? And I know there's probably different kinds of opinions all over the place. And the fact that we've got politics infused in this whole battle just makes it even worse, right? Hence, lack of discussion on campus. This is what we tend to do when things are like, oh, a little bit too much for us to talk about, right? We just don't talk, okay? But disturbing now, at the very least, that we've got news that says, oh, it was this way, and oh, it was this way. How do we feel about our news now?
Was there also a group of Black?
Yes, there was there were groups all over the place, right? There was also a group that was reported that was a Black Hebrew, was it Zionist or not? Israelite, right? Okay, so lots of terms here. Black Hebrew Israelite group. There was the Women's March also. Any other marches that were taking place? The abortion march. Anything else? That didn't really work. They didn't do it in New York, I guess, right? We know the news on New York, right? How many people know that news? Wow, it's just so surprising, some of the news, right? Okay, I'm not going to make judgment comments, but I'm just going to say surprising news lately, right? So lots of things happened in DC, lots of marches going down, difficult to feel what's going on. And what is going on with our news? Any comments on the news that we have? Yes?
Jesus was awful.
Jesus was awful.
Like, literally, even just this short video, there are people saying we should kill the kids or we should kill the natives.
Yeah, lots of terrible words being used. Angry, kill, like, whoa.
You go on YouTube. And then
YouTube.
There's a shorter version where it takes different clips, different parts of it, and then judges it
Right.
harshly.
Wow.
Once you
So
watch the whole thing,
this has become a huge problem, right? And language that we're using in this is the word kill, which, like, I mean, I shouldn't even say it on campus, like, theoretically speaking, right? So this was a good example of what it's been for us to watch our news change. Yes? It's escalated, changed. Now it's so difficult. It's almost even difficult to talk about news in the classroom. Right? This is what we're seeing right now. Okay? Just be aware that it's happening. And be aware that part of that difficulty relates to people having different opinions, right? We all know this. Okay? All right. So that's one big thing that happened.
Did you say something else happened in New York?
Yes, in terms of the abortion activists, right? Do we know what happened in terms of the abortion law in New York? Yes.
Up until birth, I guess now in New York,
Yeah.
we don't have abortions.
I don't get this. So if somebody could study this and tell me this in their research essay, that'd be good, right? Because I don't get that. I mean, we have preemies, right? Would a preemie birth then be considered abortion if they just adopted it? I mean, it's like such a confusing language that they're using in the law. I don't know what it means. Like, if we have a due date on one day and we don't want it anymore, and does that mean the baby gets killed? Does the baby go to adoption agent? What happens? I really don't know. It's really disturbing. How many people didn't know about this? Okay, not faulting you. It's like, wow, this is crazy news. Okay, and how many people knew about it? Okay, 2, 3, 4. Like, really not very many. So, gosh darn it, we should probably be knowing about this stuff, and we really aren't learning that much about it. It's not hearing.
good news sources that are bipartisan.
No.
That's the thing that I can find.
So, yeah, I mean, like, one of the things that we've learned about the news lately is that we know that they're all owned by somebody, yes? But we also now have gone through a process of watching some of those somebodies get raked over the coals in other news, right? Okay, so what I mean is that we have conglomerates of owners of certain kinds of news, and we have conglomerate owners of other kinds of news. And yeah, we have some that might be a little bit different in certain ways, like CNBC, right? It's a little bit more businessy. Bloomberg, a little bit more businessy, but again, bought, right? Okay, same thing with Fox News or Fox Business or any of those kinds of things. So when we're looking at those kinds of, no thanks, Forbes. Funny that comes up, right? Forbes too, right? Let's just jump into our topic here for the beginning and maybe make it a little bit more sensical or sense, right? So there's a famous study that was done, I think it was in the 80s, and it was conducted by Levi's. Levi's sponsored the study, they conducted the study, they reported the study, and it was great, right? And what they wanted to find out was they wanted to find out how many people liked Levi's. And that's what they reported. They said, this is how many people like Levi's. And in the questionnaire, what they asked was, which model of Levi's do you like? Or do you like the flared or the tapered, right? Do you like the 501 versus the right? I can't even remember the numbers. It's been so long. So the answers were, yes, we, like this kind versus this kind. And the results that were reported were 100% of the population that we surveyed like Levi's. Go figure. What support? And they published it and they used it for part of their, advertising and everything. Look, everybody's just like me and you. We all wear it. I was going to wear Levi's on this day. I forgot. Oh, well, right? But in essence, what we're saying is, yes, everything is bought. Okay? Think about it for a moment. Let's just hypothetically say we can do a study sponsored through any university, get National Science Foundation money. What do you think about that? Pretty objective kind of money source? Guess who decides on the amount of dollars spent in each category for the National Science Foundation?
Donors?
Congress. It's political. When we shift administrations, all of our funding is going to shift to those emphases too. I mean, never mind the shutdown. The shutdown is ruining things for indigenous people, for the environment, you name it, right? Banks, IRS, oh no, they can't collect. Oh, right. Terrible stuff, right? But even the National Science Foundation has dedicated amounts of funding for specific things. Yeah, we go through peer review. We do all that stuff. Yes, yes, yes. But it's political, okay? Another example. We had a case on Kauai. I knew I was going to need to bring up Google Earth. Here we go. Deny. Go away, you. Yay. Okay, we'll just go in. And we're going to Kauai. Oh, I miss Kauai. I think it's probably still raining there. I had flooding rains this last week, and they closed their bridge on the North Shore, everything. Okay, so we had this whole area used to be growing sugarcane, in addition to some areas of pineapple, okay? But sugarcane, price for sugar dropped tremendously. We did a bunch of subsidizing, ruined the market. California produces a lot more now. No sugar on the west side anymore, right? Same thing with pineapple. Gone. Okay. So now this is, I think, as I mentioned before, the #1 test site for genetic engineered foods and medicines, anything genetically engineered, right? Especially with plants. Okay. This is your test site. Alarming to some might be the fact that our tests are done in open air fields. Okay. Not labs, not contained, open air. Okay. It's alarming for some because those that we had working the fields were known to take some of the corn home, by example, and eat it. Immediately ending up in the hospital because they had eaten what was then marked as not for consumption, not for human consumption, right? And soon we had all these signs pop up that said, not for human consumption, so that they could protect themselves, right? We had a new law that was established on our island called eco-terrorism. Weird. Again, that kind of weirdness of having developed a law, because the law had to state it's illegal for you to burn somebody else's agricultural fields. Because we were so angry about what was going on, we were burning their test plots, right? So they had to make a law against it. Kind of weird, right? Now, also in all of this experience, we had a elementary school. Let's see if we can get even closer. I love these maps, right? This is Kekaha Waimea. Where's our school? Oh, this is just awesome. Okay, so you see the plots right here? Yes? Oh. Not as cool. There we go. Now cool. Okay, you see the plots right here. Here's our high school, right? And we've got another school over here, elementary school, right? So we've got a lot of things going on right there around all the test plots. And wouldn't you know it, on one day, we had 11 people sent to the ER, emergency room. Oops. Oh. And we found out that they had something similar to anaphylactic shock. It was like an allergic reaction that was really, really dangerous, potentially going to give them a heart attack. And it hit kids, it hit teachers, anybody that was in the area. It hit the news, and the agency in charge of growing, it was Pioneer at the time, right? Bought out eventually by, let's see, DuPont, who was then bought by Dow, who is what you know as Monsanto, right? The main owner of Monsanto, okay? Who now is in negotiations with Bayer. Okay, you should know all of these like connections of very big entities. In any event, they came out and said, oh, we weren't testing anything new. We weren't doing anything with our sprays. It must be the natural stinkweed that's in the fields, right? Nobody bought it. Nobody bought it. In fact, people just laughed. They were like, this is ridiculous. This is awful, right? And they called in the Department of Public Health, and they said, we want a full investigation. I would too, right? So they said, all right, well, let's find somebody to do it that's objective. How about we use the University of Hawaii? Makes sense, right? University system is kind of objective, bunch of scientists. That's who you should use, right? Haha, al contraire, mon mère, mon frère, right? Bonsoir, whatever you want to say, right? You know why? Because we were receiving about $24 million from those agencies specifically every year for scholarships just to get students like you to study it. And here we were going to go study the bad effects of it. What do you think our answer was going to be? Likely, right? So the community said, no way, no way. And we had to battle it out and battle it out and battle it out. Found somebody that was agreed upon. And yeah, pesticides. And yeah, they were real bad. And yeah, there's a lawsuit. And yeah, a lot of the people in this side of the island are dealing with a rare amount of things. Large majority of my female friends that I know have breast cancer or have had it. Or have fertility issues. Same thing, right? You remember that product that we in our California state declared a carcinogen? Glyphosate? Have you heard of it? We put a law against it. That's what's in that kind of stuff, right? And it's affected people's fertility and breast cancer, right? Because it disrupts your endocrine system. Okay? So, definitely when we're talking about research, definitely when we're talking about news, don't ever forget it's all bought and owned by somebody, right? And we have become more polarized in our environment to the point that we just need to recognize this. Instead of going to one news source over another, I challenge you to try and do what I try and do every day, which is really a lot to do, but you need to go to all. And that means go to that extreme and try and catch the ones in the middle that are the most mainstream. That's the best I can tell you. And I'm really sorry, because it used to be when I was a kid, we had the encyclopedia and a lot of trust that what was written in there was like, right. Now we got the internet. Now anybody can print anything. Anybody can type Wikipedia, right? Don't use Wikipedia. Like, you can use Wikipedia to find other sources, but don't use it to cite, because it's like, I can write that, right? My daughter that's almost 12 can type in there and write something, right? So in terms of what sources to trust, yeah, this is like one of the perfect questions. I mean, we could have a whole semester class on just this, right? Think about it. Really? A week on the New York Times, or a week on the Washington Post, or you know, anything like that, right? Google even, right? They say you got to be careful with all your different search engines because they kind of adapt to you, right? Do you know that? How many people knew that? Okay, all right, good. So we're getting a little bit more sensitive, but we got to keep being sensitive. And really, I'm apologizing to you because it's a lot more work for you, isn't it? Because if you don't do that work, then all you're doing is listening to the snippets that your favorite people might be repeating the same way, and then you don't get it all, right? Anyway, sponsored research. Okay. Honest disclosure results, we talked about that one already, remember? Right? Okay. Advocacy. Now, remember, we were talking about anthropology. Where's my stuff? We're talking about the nature of anthropology, and we're talking about anthropology being interpretive, right? And we said it's like looking at everything through lenses. I love wearing my sunglasses in the classroom, so I got to do this here. So if we're gonna go into the field and we've got our cultural lenses on and we're making interpretations, what do we mean by this idea called applied work? Because if we're applying what we're learning that's an interpretation, is it possible we could make a mistake? Yeah. We could totally screw up, right? I mean, one of the examples that we had in some of our work was we were to present our territory of Awastingni, their map, in court, right? Here's the claim, right? You're not going to make a claim for land unless you present a map, right? Here's our claim. And the first map that was put in didn't have the illegal colonists that were on the map. Why? Didn't want to put them in. They're illegal. They shouldn't be there, right? I don't like that they're there. I'm not going to present an indigenous rights claim with my colonists that are illegal still on that map. So that's how it was submitted. And the court said, there's no colonists here. We're here about court, and it's an issue about your boundaries. So you're not going to put these on the map. That means you go back and do it again. And so we had to spend another $60,000 to go do a whole nother mapping process with people, participatory, right? And make it so that we put the right thing on the map. So advocacy, we can mess up if we aren't doing things in the right way, right? If we do things in different ways. So one of the things that we say that we like to do instead is to ensure that we do things in a participatory way. And what I mean by that is I don't go out and search projects to work on. But when people come to me and they say, hey, can you help me out with this? I can listen and I can say, yeah, maybe I can. I know a funding agent that does something like that, and I can hook you up and help you. And if you need to learn this, I know this, and I can help you with that, right? As opposed to something that we oftentimes do in what we would call maybe development, right? Anybody heard of development, that word, right? Development in international relations. Anybody know about that? Raise your hands. p.m. Good, right? So we give money to the USAID Agency of International Development, right? And we go around the world and we do projects around the world by example, right? How we often do our projects, similar to the NSF, take note, right? Is we mandate that they're a specific kind. Not just certain dollars spent on certain categories, but they got to look like this or look like that, right? An example, if you're going to put down using cars and you have a project that's funded by the US government, you have to buy Ford cars, not something foreign, right? Okay, so everything is very well mapped out. And we come into a community and say, we're here and we're here to help, and this is what our money is for. And we do a study and tell you all the things that are wrong with you, right? Literacy, missing this much, this many kids not in school, this many kids sick, right? So in our terms of advocacy, if we maintain the lens, the idea that we know how everything works is all the same everywhere, and we don't take off our lenses in our work, we run the risk of creating big problems, right? Here's another flip side to it. What if we don't say anything at all? What if we are in the field and we find something so horrible and awful that happens and we say nothing? I brought a team of people into one community, and it took us about 4 hours to walk in. So there were no roads to get in. There were no cash in the community. Nobody had dollars. They traded everything, right? Food, all that kind of stuff. It was all for trade, right? And I walked into the meeting, and it was in the grade school, and there was only women there. It was weird, right? My experience in most of my work is I'm always surrounded by men. To even have a woman there, right? You remember we talked about this, like they can't talk with them because I can't speak my Yagna, right? So what in the world is this meeting, community meeting with nothing but women here? Somebody stood up to translate, and it came out that we were there to talk with them, and they realized it was their chance to tell us that every single day their kids go all the way to town and then back again for high school. And both coming and going, the girls are getting raped every day. Like, oh my gosh. You listen to something like that in the field. You hear crap like that in the field all the time. Horrible, awful things can be in the field. Now, what do? Walk away, publish your work, and go away? Hide your head in your book because it's too much culture shock for you? Or something else, right? For us as anthropologists, if we were not to address it, it would be a violation of our ethics. Now that we've been told these kinds of things, it's almost like the teacher that's been told about the kid with child abuse. They're mandated to report it to the state, right? Otherwise, they can be sued. It's almost like that. If we hear of these kinds of things, we must bring it up. We must address it. We ended up renting a house in the town and staffed it with people until I think it's still there, right? That way there is no going back and forth. Yeah, it's a boarding school. It's not ideal, but hey, it's a lot better than trying to hire guns to go back and forth with them, right? And had I not addressed it, probably never go back. Probably wouldn't even feel comfortable about communicating with the leaders, like embarrassed that I hadn't done anything, right? So advocacy is a critical piece to our job, and like we've talked about what we need to deal with, right? So anthropologists in the military, we briefly talked about this. Our biggest concern, right, is a couple of things. Actually, this last sentence right here, or this last line right here, we're concerned about confidentiality because our allegiance is to our employer. If our employer, for example, is the University of Hawaii or Washington or Redlands or the National Science Foundation, they're mandated by law not to ask us who the participants are, right? But military, who are you talking with? We're paying your, right? Paying your paycheck. Our allegiance then is to provide for confidentiality. It's arguable whether or not we can do informed consent because it might be considered under duress. Yeah. And then protecting a vulnerable population is part of our duty. And to this regard, we're not even doing it. So that's why we as an association have come out against it. All right. Yes, question.
So that relates to anthropologists under the hiring and working under the military.
Correct.
Are there, and is it not violating ethics if you are to be hired by, say, a third-party company to simply observe at a distance and study objectively either one side or both sides of the conflict? In which case you're not necessarily representing the
Right.
values or principles.
And if it's not applied, it's different, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Right. But it gets really complicated, right? I mean, with our work in Nicaragua, we were sponsored by the World Bank and also sponsored by USAID. So U.S. government is sponsoring this. The World Bank is sponsoring this. It's happening in the backyard of Nicaragua. What's going on in Nicaragua right now? Does anybody know? Has anybody seen news? Yes. What have you seen?
It was a little while ago, so I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but I think they had issues with their government. People were like getting killed in the streets, basically.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's what's happened. We had the president, and sometimes presidents do this, we had the president make a law that said, oh, we're all going to pay more Social Security now. You guys ready to take less of your paycheck than you do today? Suck. I don't want to, right? Okay, so everybody has to pay more money into Social Security, and not only that, but the elders, those on Social Security, you now get less. Okay, so that was the news that came out in April, and the day that the news came out, the elders went to the streets in Managua, right? This is where it started. The elders went to the streets, and they were reprimanded by the police and the military. In some cases beat, in some cases hurt, right? And what do you think the young ones that were paying into that new system felt about their elders getting beat when they went into the streets to protest? How'd the young ones feel? How would you feel if your parents went into the street to protest, not getting what they were due, and they got beat? What would you do? Maybe a difficult question, okay? The young kids there went into the street to protest with the elders, stand right by them, okay? And little by little, there was a lot of aggression and a lot of anger and a lot of violence between military police and the youth. It escalated even worse. Fires were set. A group retreated into a church for like a month, right? That meant the Catholic Church was all of a sudden protecting a bunch of young hooligans, right? It was not really. Yeah. Politics went like this again. This is reminding us of the 1980s again. Even the revolution before, bless you, right? So we had an involvement of Catholic priests who were prominent in the liberation theology movement that were banking up against, right, a lot of what was happening in Nicaragua. So again, that scene returned. People were killed. We even had a baby that was brought and drug out into the streets and lit on fire. Okay, now that's like, whoa, like that like really topped things off for everybody, right? Then Mother's Day came up. I was all April. Long April, right? Mother's Day came up and they went on a Mother's Day march. And lo and behold, in the front of the march were the mothers that had lost their kids to this violence. So it was like an honorary march for the mothers, right? And the march went down the road and they turned a corner and they didn't realize it. And right when they turned a corner was guns, military police, and a bunch of mothers died. And it's just gone from one to the next, right? Human rights organizations are talking out about this. I'm now on YouTube. I'm not going to share this beyond our class. Please don't. Their legal certification is being revoked in country. That then means that the National Assembly claims that all of their property is the state's. Files, cars, buildings, computers, everything is being turned over to the state. So even the human rights organizations that are there to try and help them are losing everything. The ones that I know that are the top lawyers for human rights in the country are not in country right now. And just yesterday, the last big news station people left. And they're now broadcasting from Costa Rica. So that's what's going on right now in Nicaragua, right? Oh, how did we get on all that? Anthropologists in the military. We're talking about vulnerable population. We're talking about military. And you asked a question, right? How do we get on all that? Boy, that was quite the story. I know I have to tell you these stories anyways because it's all part of a conversation, but let me think for a minute here. It wasn't in regards to news. It was in regards to violence. It was in regards to what was happening in terms of violence because you talked about that. Come on, somebody help me out here. Advocacy, yes, advocacy. Well, that would kind of relate, right? Because it's still our duty to raise the voice here, which is a little dangerous for some of us, right? Especially
USAID.
USAID. Oh, yes, no.
That was a tangent.
Just in terms of methods, USAID being the ones that, oh, yes, got it now, thank you. USAID, West, and the World Bank were the ones that sponsored our project, okay? So now let's kind of remind ourselves that we've got the same administration today that we had during the revolution and also during the 10-year Civil War, okay? So our work that was sponsored by the World Bank and USAID can be seen as Northern, think about it, as almost anti-sovereignty of Nicaragua, yes? Actually, totally is. Let's think about it for a minute, right? We took Nicaragua to court, got an international decision against Nicaragua, and the decision was you have to title the lands to the indigenous people, right? And Nicaragua, and we said, oh yeah, and we went to the World Bank. And the World Bank every year pays 70% of all of the spending that Nicaragua spends. So 70% of all the money that they spend every year comes to the World Bank. And we said to the World Bank, hey, look, remember, we talked about this already. The Mesoamerican Biological Corridor, remember this? It's that last area protecting that broadleaf rainforest, right? Remember the broadleaf, right? Our discussion about the air, okay? And the World Bank said, you're right. They have some agency that's called GEF. Anybody ever heard of that before? I have no pen. GEF, General Environment Fund, okay? And we convinced the GEF people at the World Bank that this was super critical. And they said, aha, Nicaragua, if you don't do this now, we're leaving. That means it cripples the economy, right? So in that sense, we coerced them completely, right? We violated their sovereignty 100%, coerced them by threatening them at the bank, okay? So pretty aggressive, pretty Northern when you think about it again, right? Today, one of the big concerns is about the Northern Yankees. Get the Northern Yankees out. Again, it's the same message, okay? About 2 months ago, the consulate general was shot at in her house. And after that, she left the country. So our country no longer has official legal running capacity in that country anymore, right? Last week, 37 banks were closed so that Ortega doesn't have access to money. It's just spiraling. It's amazing to watch, Okay, so that's an example of like northern control on the south versus something else, right? Coming up and supporting grassroots work. Okay, so proper roles for us. Like I said, we have done a lot with needs and talking about needs, but our biggest contribution can be in listening, right? Rather than telling people what's wrong with them, listening to what their concerns are, because maybe in their cultures, they're better apt to say, what's the problem, right? Okay. All right, we'll go into that a lot more through the semester. In terms of case studies, a reminder about ethics. I wanted to provide you these links because you might not be aware of some of these things. So the Tuskegee syphilis study was one that really kicked off a lot of our country's important focus on ethics in social research and medical research. We infected people with the disease. We did not give them the proper medical attention. It was so horrific that we ended up even giving them a presidential apology for it, right? And a lot of that kicked off how we treated medical research in the future, okay? Ethics and the need for human subjects review. Now, we have a gentleman by the name of Napoleon Chagnon, and you read his article, right? Probably one of the most controversial anthropologists that we have. Uh-oh, did I leave it at home? I think I did. My daughter read it. She's trying to keep up with you guys in the study. Okay. But essentially, I'll tell you what happened. He went into the field, right? Worked with the Yanomami people. And when he worked with them, he came away with an idea that they were very aggressive, very violent, and their common nature was aggression, okay? Violence. And when he returned, he wrote about them, called them the noble savages. Difficult word when you think about that. And said that they were brutish like apes. Like, really, is what was said. And people were so upset by it that the indigenous people protested. He was banned from the country, never able to return, right? Not able to go back. We opened up an investigation called, it was about the area called El Dorado. And the investigation was about this happening quite frequently with many different kinds of scientists in the area. And there was a book that was written about it called Darkness in El Dorado, so you can go read that if you're interested in that kind of a thing. But it talked a lot about what we as anthropologists ought do in taking care of how we write about others, right? That we're representing others in that case, right? Not necessarily representing them in what we're saying, okay? So Napoleon Chagnon is well known for what happened. Les Sponsell is a colleague of mine from the University of Hawaii. He was the one that wrote the summary on the decision and what went down there. Any questions about that? Okay, next on here I have Margaret Mead, who to many people is a dear and wonderful anthropologist. She wrote a book called The Coming of Age in Samoa. I'll let you take a look at it. You can look at it Samoa. No, I'm not going to do that. Right. But here we had a problem with ethics. Here we were studying, or she was studying what it was like to be underaged. Okay, so number one, that's a big problem, right? If we want to interview people that are under the age of 18, we now have to go through a big thing, getting their permission, making sure that all the subjects review committee think it's okay that we ask questions like this of these young people, right? That was not done at this point, right? And the questions that she ended up asking ended up being about two things. One, it was about violence in the home, and the other was about sexual promiscuity. And she compared Samoa with the United States, did the same thing in the United States, and then wrote about it, right? Now, who do you think was more sexually promiscuous, her own culture or the other? The other, yep. Okay? Same thing with the violence and all that kind of bit, right? So that was bad even to ask questions about that topic, right? Then we went into some consternations about, hey, were people really even saying the truth? Can what she wrote about be considered scientific? Because we don't know if these girls actually would have told the truth, right? Girls, if you were young and somebody came and asked you these questions, would you tell the truth? Don't answer. I don't know if I would, right? It's kind of not a typical question that we get answered or asked, right? So not sure if it can be held as truth. So we ended up having another gentleman go back, David Friedman, go back and study this. And he went and found all the original contributors to her work. Don't ask me how, right? Confidentiality, privacy. I don't get how he found them, but he did. Okay? And asked them much later, right? They were all in their 60s and 70s. Asked them much later, hey, did you tell the truth? Again, I don't know if they're going to lie about not telling the truth or telling the truth when they were, and not only that, it's a dude, right? I mean, okay, it was girl talking about this with another girl, right? But like once we get a dude with traditional society women in their 60s talking about this and what they said about that in their adolescence, can't say that what his results were truthful either, right? So, big ethical issue when we deal with topics that are uncomfortable, right? When we talked about economics, that's an example. Here's another example. And now we have a book that's famous by a famous anthropologist that lots of people read. Lots of people read. Are they all aware that we have this problem? Not sure. Now you are. So now you know, right? But not everybody is when they get to that, okay? So, criticism surfaces, something in the New York Times about that. All right, how many people know about the Stanford experiment? I think, was it one, two, a couple of people? Have you seen the movie? No? No? Let's see the trailer. It's really amazing. It blows me away. Oh, wait. Wait, how come I can't hear? Should. There.
Would you rather be a guard or a prisoner?
I don't think I have the qualities to be a guard.
Prisoner. Prisoner, I guess. Prisoner sounds like it would be a little less work.
Prisoner.
Why's that?
Nobody likes guards.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. This experiment will be an extension of my research into the effects prisons can have on human behavior. You're going to be pleased to know that you all have been chosen to be the prison guards. But under no circumstances whatsoever are you to physically assault the prisoners in any way. So remember, just as you were watching the prisoners, my graduate staff and I will be watching
Can you imagine being involved in this study? Just like put yourself in these students' positions.
All right, gentlemen, we ought to have ourselves a lot of fun.
Rule number 1, prisoners must remain silent. This is an exercise period.
Okay, is it just me, or are these guys taking this thing a bit too seriously? Why don't you give me 20 push-ups?
Look at this guy. He's John Wayne or something.
You address me as Mr. Correctional Officer. This might be an interesting 2 weeks after all.
Why don't you make up your bunk, 8612?
I did, Mr. Correctional Officer.
Well, that's not what I say.
Hey, what are you doing?
Mm. Sorry, didn't warn you about that.
You sick and
Should we step in? No. Let the guards figure it out. Let's see where it goes.
Good evening, gentlemen. How about we make this one a night to remember?
This is all real. They won't let you go. They won't let us leave.
Those are not prisoners. Those are not subjects. Those are boys, and you are harming them.
Let me out of here! I'm out! How you thought you were gonna get some playtime in the yard, boy? Is that what you thought this was gonna be?
I had no idea it would turn out this way.
It's like,
Crazy. I used to show this in my criminal justice class.
Didn't they like?
They stopped the study.
They picked them up in like cop cars and like actually.
Yeah. It was like a full meal deal. Like they set it up and they knew what they were gonna be, but then when they showed up, it was in cop cars and in front of their neighbors, and it was just awful, right?
Did they not tell them like what was gonna happen? It's kind of like.
Correct. It was a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They actually.
What do you think about this? This was determined to be highly unethical. This is a good example as to why we have a lot of different institutional review boards of our work, because this was unexpected and unbelievable and horrific and so bad that we had to stop it in the middle of it. Like it never finished. So that was a very surprising thing that changed a lot of social research for quite some time. All right, here's another video clip on the Nuremberg trials. We've got a little bit of time today, so I'm gonna just watch these with us. This is a short clip.
In 1945, at Nuremberg's Hall of Justice, Allied powers gathered, seeking
This
accountability.
also is amazing.
Today, Courtroom 600 is one of the most visited sites in the city.
You come to the building, you walk through the door, and you come into this courtroom. It really hits you. This is the place where international justice was spoken for the first time.
In the wake of World War II's devastation, the world sought answers and found them in Nuremberg.
The accused were sitting here. People like Hermann Göring, right here in that corner. Next to him, Rudolf Hess, Ribbentrop, Albert Speer, Judenstreicher, people from the armed forces.
With the world watching, the Allies knew a fair trial was critical.
I mean,
and
this
so
is
they
just
methodically
mind-blowing that
and
this
painstakingly
occurred.
detail laid
It's
out
amazing.
layer upon layer of evidence.
After almost 1 year, they came to Judgment Day. 12 received a death sentence, 3 acquittals, and the rest received long-term imprisonment or life-term imprisonment and were sent then to this specific prison in village.
Ultimately, the trials created a powerful framework for judging future wars, as Nuremberg was a radical departure in the method of assessing responsibility and assigning relevant punishment.
Normally they say the government acted and not the people inside. This was the first time where they said, no, not a government acts, the people are acting.
Very
And
different.
that people within a government were made accountable. Without Nuremberg, there would be no UN Criminal High Court and trials against people in Rwanda, against Milosevic from Yugoslavia. And this makes it a very important place.
Perhaps the chief US prosecutor, Robert H. Jackson, said it best. If we can cultivate in the world the idea that aggressive war-making is the way to the prisoner's dock rather than the way to honors, we will have accomplished something towards making peace more secure.
All right. Again, pretty amazing ability to deal with some, yes.
Sorry, I wasn't too clear on what actually happened.
So the Nuremberg trial was, hold on. Guess it goes into the verdict after that. Here, I'll just click it off. So the Nuremberg trial is what happened as a result of the Nazi death camps and all of that. So it was a process whereby the world was asking Israel, or not Israel, but Germany to bring themselves accountable for it. And so they brought the people that were in charge of those military posts and went through a court. So it was like the first time that we had like a war situation and then went to court over it, right? You know, as part of our way of dealing with it. Okay. Likewise, Rwanda. Let's think about what went down in Rwanda. When we first started dealing with the news of Rwanda internationally, we made an error and didn't even define genocide correctly. Strangely enough, it didn't fall under the declaration that protected people in cases of genocide, just because we messed up the definition. So we had to make an entirely new committee dedicated just to making a correction for what happened with the genocide in the country. So kind of a lot of things happened there. Now, this is a trailer that I really, really want to show you, and then we'll get into the rest of the lecture. So no more films after this. But this trailer is pretty amazing because when you think about trying to forgive neighbors around you in a case of genocide.
If they tell you that a murderer has been released in the neighborhood, how would you feel? And this time we weren't releasing one, we were releasing 40,000.
When you consider 2 million people who got destroyed
At the hands of their neighbors. When you get 1 million people dead, it becomes impossible to exert justice.
The president of Rwanda passed a decision to release the perpetrators who had confessed their role in genocide. So far, 50,000 have been released.
why on earth should a survivor of the genocide in Rwanda forgive somebody who murdered either their mother or husband or brother or sister?
bajyaga nk'umwe ariko abo bose nta n'umwe usigaye yasigaye uwo musaza
bose hamwe bazisanga ari abantu babigendishe kandi mwumva bimbera mu mutima ku buryo bumvaga bidashobora kuvamo.
Somebody has to tell them this painful message of forgiveness.
ariko igihe mu mutima wanjye umva nta mbabazi zirimo.
nuko bigirira isoni ariko naragerageje nsanga umuntu waduhuza nawe tukahamera rwose duhuye.
If we let them be consumed by that ongoing bitterness and anger, it's like an acidic content in a metal container. It will eventually eat the container up. When they forgive, they get released.
We have rebuilt the roads, we have rebuilt the schools, we have rebuilt the hospitals, rebuilding the hearts of people. Remain a big challenge.
Are you crazy? Reconciliation?
The one who killed you.
How do I reconcile with someone who killed my family?
Forgiveness is not human, it's divine.
All right, any thoughts about that? Any thoughts about that?
So the film they were asking someone to forgive.
Yeah, they're talking about forgiveness, and it seems kind of stressful for her, doesn't it?
No.
Yeah. It's like a huge topic, but even like trying to bridge the topic. I mean, bless you, bless you, bless you, bless you, bless you. So, but this is the issue though in the country. It's like, how do you deal with this, right? I mean, one of the things that they're talking about in that trailer is that they had husbands and wives that were of different ethnic groups, and the wife or the husband killed the other just because of that ethnic difference. And it's something that was experienced all over the country. And so how do you recover from something like that? It would be their question, right? And this is one of the attempts that they're going through at trying to deal with that, right? And yeah, it's like a lot to deal with, right? In the sense that everyone has a story, right? Everyone that would be talking in that film, or everyone in the country would have a story of how many relatives were died and the like, you know? Where do you go from there? It's really interesting that we have somebody trying to take an approach and see what happens, right? I'm not sure what'll happen with their work, but it'd be something to follow, right? Difficult issue to try and deal with in a country, right? When you have mass violence. I mean, we talk about the aggressive nature of our news, right? And the polarity of our news, and how we have all this kind of infighting about views, right? But this is something very different. This is way to the extreme. So it'd be nice to learn from these people and what they're up to. I wish them all the best, right? Okay, NAGPRA. All right, NAGPRA stands for, you ready? Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. Okay, so Native Americans, yeah. Graves, yeah. Protection, got it. Repatriation, what does that mean? You ever heard of the word expat or expatriate? Okay, maybe not. Expatriate is somebody that is living abroad, right? And when they return home, they're repatriating. Okay, so when you, yes. Yes, returning items, but specifically repatriation is returning items and maybe reburial, right? Like in Hawaii, we had a lot of reburials that were happening. Okay. All right. So part of what we're experiencing even today is we will have construction beginning somewhere, or we'll have some way of finding out that there's some kind of archaeological evidence of sorts, right? Burial of sorts, bones, by example, okay? One of the worst things that I hear about are construction workers that just cover it up. And I hear about it a lot. You shake your head. I know, I'm the same way. I feel exactly the same. I hate it, and I hear about it a lot. It's horrible, because the idea is that these are sacred to these cultures and need to be protected, just like my grandma is protected in a cemetery, right? We have maybe a little bit of a definition or history on theirs, but it's essentially the same, right? So you can go to the government website here and take a look at NAGPRA. They give you a bit of an update. Bless you. Wow, we have a lot of sneezing going on in here. Everybody make sure you take your vitamin C. I hear lots of people are getting sick, so do that. All right. So you can go browse through the NAGPRA site. What I will tell you about is something that you'll see on your film next week, and that's talking about the Umatilla. And in Kennewick, Washington, the tri-states area, right, we found, University of Washington found a body, and we called him Kennewick Man, obviously, because we found him in Kennewick, right? Makes sense. And when we found him, we thought, oh, wow, this is amazing. And we brought him back to the university. We have a museum there, right? All kinds of really cool stuff in the museum. There's a cafe next to us, really nice to go study there. Right? And when we took him, we had a group from the Umatilla that said, hey, what are you doing? We said, look at our find, right? And then we started testing it. We found out he was like around 9,000 years old, right? Around when we started domesticating crops and things like that. And everything changed and everything transformed. So this person is huge for us as scientists, right? He can tell us lots of stuff, everything. We could just dissect the heck out of him and find out all kinds of cool stuff, right? And the Umatilla said, nuh-uh, he's ours. You respect him. He's one of our ancestors. It's like he's cultural property for our tribe, right? We went to court over it. You know what we said? He doesn't look like you. No, like for reals is what we said. It doesn't look like an Umatilla. Looks more Caucasian. Seriously, for real, this is what we argued in court, right? I went into grad school that year under NAGPRA, right? And ultimately, when we went to court, we all presented our sides. The judge said, okay. He's going to reside with the University of Washington, at least for now, right? And if you ever do any tests on him, you got to come to court first and present your plan, and the Umatilla are going to review it and let you know what they think about it. That was pretty good, right? Gave full protection rights to the Umatilla, even though it didn't look like them, right? Can't believe we said that. Still, to this very day, we can say things that are ethnocentric and just like, wow, what were we thinking? I don't know. Okay, so you can read more about those cases there. And we have the case of the Kumeyaay, which was very similar, happening here just south of us, okay? North of San Diego, south of us here, kind of in the middle. Same kind of case. And guess what? It's still under litigation, still disagreement about getting the cultural resources returned back to the tribe. So yes, we have NAGPRA. Yes, it's for protecting people, but it doesn't always work, right? Now, what about Native Hawaiians? Y'all think like that's not a big question, but it's really huge, right? Are Native Hawaiians Native Americans? That's a head scratcher, isn't it? No, they're not. We tried to make them that way, yes?
We sold their land just as much.
Yeah, right. Okay. Gosh, I really need a pen. Okay, just deal with it. Breathe, right? Okay, so we suggested a law that was called the Akaka Bill. Yeah, I remember it, right? And the Akaka Bill said, we're going to look at Native Hawaiians as if they're indigenous, right? This is the language. And we're going to call them Native Americans. Okay? How about that? Yay! And that means that they get all the rights like Native Americans that they should. Bless you. Again, what's up with that? Sneeze, sneeze, sneeze. That means they get right to special education under their tribal decisions, right? That means they get special protection for healthcare and a whole host of other things, including land, right? So yay, win-win, right? No, lose, potentially, really lose. Why? Because they're an illegally occupied sovereign nation under international law. Prior to illegal occupation by the United States, lots of terms here, right? They had enough interactions with other countries that literally make them a sovereign nation under international law. Then the United States came in. We parked the battleship in Pearl Harbor, Pearl Lagoon, right? We even put a bayonet to Queen Liliuokalani's head and said, sign this. We call that the state constitution. It's called the Bayonet Constitution. Yay, right? Technically, under international law, the state of Hawaii is not a legal state. And even the University of Hawaii Department of Anthropology would tell you that. So if they're not Native American, we had to add a special addendum to NAGPRA that said, and Native Hawaiians. Did the same thing with Native Alaskans because they fell out of a lot of the negotiations with the lower 48 as well. Okay, so Native Hawaiians, Native Alaskans negotiated very differently with the federal government for things, right? We still have a lot of pressure on people in Hawaii to do something like the Akaka Bill. We changed the name, we call it the Native Hawaiian Reorganization Act, right? Made it less political, sort of, right? We even stamped the word sovereignty on it, but it kind of didn't really mean that because what happens if we say that the Native Hawaiians are Native Americans in terms of their sovereignty? Yeah, totally loses their claims. In fact, what they say is we give up our claim to sovereignty and we accept your illegal colonialism, and now we'll consider ourselves members of a state or of a nationhood. Wow. How many people knew about that situation in Hawaii? Okay. The fact that there's only 3 of us in the room that are aware of it should make you very concerned. Yes? We learned history, didn't we? No, not all of it, right? Okay. So, special piece about the Native Hawaiians being incorporated into NAGPRA, right? Ishi's brain had another experience with a gentleman that we said was the last of his kind, kept his brain. Again, same thing. Groups wanted it back. Berkeley. Thought Berkeley was like enlightened, right? Not here. Been arguing over his brain. So again, you can look at these links, use these links if you want to for your research essays. Now, Camp Naui. We did it on Kauai. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we were protected by NAGPRA, but it still happens. Stuff still goes down, right? So here's what happened. We had a gentleman come in, buy a piece of property. A lot of the graves in Hawaii aren't marked. On purpose, not marked. Okay? But the people who are related to those that are buried typically know where they are, right? The land was sold unawares to these individuals, and all of a sudden construction began. And they had ancestors buried on these lands. Okay? And that meant that they were all of a sudden concerned. How many ancestors? We found 30 burial sites. Each site had at least 3 people. Oh my gosh, that's a lot, right? We called in the state archaeologist as required, and she made a burial plan without consulting the burial committee. We have a burial committee in Hawaii, right? And in the burial plan, she said, we're going to encase everything in cement. Didn't know culturally that that would cut off the living bones. In Native Hawaiian culture, there's a belief that the bones are actually living, and the maintenance of the bones will connect living with the past and the future. And if ever killed those bones, then it severs that connection, and it's something terrible, right? So with her burial plan, which was then put into action, all of those bones were surrounded in cement, and people were horrified. We had people protesting with those, like, you know, those elbow joint pipes, and they duct tape all around, and lots got arrested, thrown in jail. We went through 16 proposed different burial plans with the court and no. Finally approved one, built the house. It's still there today. The community lost out. Guess what it is? Vacation rental. How many people want to know where it is so they don't rent it and run into a situation where they're like watching Poltergeist? Ah! How many people saw Poltergeist in here? Okay, so not many. So not many know what I'm talking about. It was horrifying. I saw Poltergeist 1, 2, 3. Right? The bodies come up from the ground. It's horrible, right? But it's not even rented. So people aren't renting it, right? It's word has it, it's haunted. It's not rented. Now all the bones underneath it are dead and violated all the rules with NAGPRA. Some have talked about taking this case to the Supreme Court, maybe even further if we have to. Wow. Surprising things that we've done to what we call cultural resources. Yeah? That's what this is, cultural resources. Okay, any questions? No? Okay, I'm going to miss you guys next week. Feel free to email me and all that kind of stuff. Okay? Be well. Enjoy your clips on the Umatilla and the Native Americans. It's going to be good ones.